The night the moon turned silver-white over the Frostvale Mountains, the pack gathered to cast her out. Alara Wynn knelt in the snow, her hair tangled with ash and tears, her palms pressed to the frozen earth as if begging it to swallow her whole. Around her, wolves in human form stood in a half-circle, alpha, elders, and hunters, each cloaked in fur and judgment. "Wolfless," the alpha spat. The word cracked through the silence like a whip. "You carry no scent of power, no trace of bond. You are a burden to the bloodline of Windcrest." Alara lifted her face, trembling. "Alpha Rion, I can still serve. Let me stay as a healer, or a gatherer, please." But the alpha's mate hissed. "A healer without a wolf? You would curse every wound you touch." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Somewhere behind her, someone threw a stone. It struck her shoulder. She did not move. The moon hung high, cold and merciless. Its glow made her look ghost-like. Neither woman nor wolf, only an echo of both. She had waited years for her first shift. On the night of the moon blessing, when others had torn their skins and howled into the stars, she had only screamed in pain. The goddess had remained silent. Since then, she had lived among whispers and pitying glances, each day shrinking a little more until she became invisible. Now invisibility would no longer be enough. Tonight, she would be erased. The alpha raised the silver mark of judgment, a crescent-shaped brand. By decree of the pack and the law of the goddess, Alara Wynn is hereby banished. She leaves these lands as prey, not kin. If she returns, she will be hunted. The crowd roared their approval. The brand sizzled as it touched her wrist, the smell of burned flesh mingled with snow. Alara bit back a cry. When they finally turned their backs, torches flickering, she remained on her knees until their footsteps faded. Then she stood, swaying, her breath a cloud of pain in the air. The forest swallowed her whole. Barefooted, she walked until the scent of pack territory vanished, replaced by pine and frost. The cold gnawed at her, biting through the thin cloth she wore. Branches clawed at her arms. Still, she walked. "If you still see me, moon goddess," she whispered, "let my life have meaning." Her voice was small, but it carried, through the trees, across the river, and far beyond where mortal ears could hear. Somewhere, deep within the Silver Dominion's royal keep, a beast stirred in his sleep. Alara did not know that yet. She only knew hunger. Days passed. She learned to steal warmth from fallen leaves, to drink from streams, to trap rabbits with trembling hands. Nights were harder. The silence pressed against her skull, until she began talking to herself, to the moon, to the wind, to the shadow of what could have been her wolf. "You were supposed to come," she murmured one night, tracing the brand on her wrist. "I waited. I believed." No answer came, only the distant howl of other packs, wolves who belonged, who would never know the ache of being unseen. She curled beside a tree root and closed her eyes. The snow drifted over her like a blanket. On the 7th night she dreamed. A silver figure stood before her, faceless but radiant. The moon burned behind it like an eye. "Alara Wynn," the voice said, neither male nor female, "do not curse your silence. Even the voiceless have songs that move kings." Her heart thudded. "Who are you?" The figure's hand touched her chest. "Not all wolves walk the earth. Some awaken the heavens." When she opened her eyes, dawn was breaking. For the first time since her exile, warmth spread through her ribs, soft, unfamiliar. She rose and followed where the light led. Beyond the forest, tales drifted on the wind, of a king whose roar could crumble stone, of an alpha whose beast had no leash. They called him Draven Valeborn, the moon's chosen and cursed, the alpha king of the Silver Dominion. Alara had heard the stories even as a child. Mothers used them to frighten pups into obedience. Sleep before the beast king hears your breath. But as she wandered, half-starved and barefoot, those tales felt like distant thunder, real enough to make her heart race, though she did not know why. At night she dreamed of eyes the color of molten silver, staring through cages of fire. In her dreams, he always looked lost, like something ancient chained within itself. She told herself it was madness born of hunger, yet sometimes she woke with tears on her face. Winter deepened. On a pale morning, she found herself near the borders of the Silver Dominion. The land there glittered like frost-forged glass. Beautiful, but deadly. She knelt by a frozen stream, trying to break the ice for water. A sudden snap echoed. A wire tightened around her ankle. She gasped as the trap yanked her off balance. "Got you, trespasser," a harsh voice growled. A soldier stepped from the trees, cloaked in black fur, the crest of the Dominion gleaming on his chest. "I'm not," she began, but he struck her across the face. Blood spattered the snow. "Wolfless," he sneered, sniffing the air. "You reek of nothing. The king forbids strays." He raised his blade. Ilara flinched, whispering, "Please." Then the air shifted, heavy, electric, ancient. A growl rolled through the forest, deeper than thunder. The soldier froze. Through the mist, a figure emerged on horseback. His armor gleamed darkly, etched with silver veins. His eyes glowed faintly, like moons caught in shadow. The soldier dropped to his knees. Your Majesty." Draven Valeborn did not speak. He dismounted, his boots sinking into the snow. Every breath from him seemed to bend the air around his body. Ilara tried to crawl backward, but the snare held her. The king's gaze fell on her, cold, assessing. For a moment his nostrils flared as if scenting something long forgotten. "Release her," he ordered, his voice low, dangerous. The soldier hesitated. "But my king, she's wolfless, a banished one." Draven's eyes narrowed. "Did I stutter?" The man fumbled to obey, cutting the wire. Ilara collapsed to the ground, clutching her bleeding ankle. When she looked up again, the king was staring into the distance, his jaw clenched. "You," he said quietly, though not to her. "You feel familiar." The soldier shifted nervously. "Majesty?" Draven blinked, as if awakening from a trance. "Take her to the border hut. Feed her. Then let her go." He turned to leave, the cold swirling around him like a storm barely contained. Ilara's voice, hoarse and small, followed him. "Thank you, my king." He paused, just for a heartbeat, and then rode away without a word. That night, wrapped in a torn blanket beside the border fire, Ilara watched the moon rise. She did not know what had passed between them, only that when his eyes met hers, the world had fallen silent. The same silence she had once begged to end. She touched her chest, where the dream figure's hand had once rested. Even the voiceless have songs that move kings. A single tear slid down her cheek. Far away in the fortress of the Silver Throne, Draven Valeborn stood alone before his mirror. His reflection flickered. For an instant, he saw her face instead of his own. The beast inside him stirred, uneasy, curious, remembering the scent of snow and fear, and something else, something pure. The throne room of the Silver Dominion never slept. Torches lined its marble walls, fed by oils that burned blue instead of gold, casting a cold light over the court of wolves. Every noble who entered kept their eyes lowered. No one looked too long at the man seated upon the obsidian throne, King Draven Valeborn, the moon's punishment. Crowned at 18, feared at 20, half legend, half curse. Tonight, his crown felt heavier than ever. The council droned on about border disputes and trade agreements, words that dissolved before they reached him. He could hear every heartbeat in the chamber instead, their fear drumming against the floor. It always began like this, whispers growing too loud, the beast in his chest stirring against its chains. "Your Majesty," said Chancellor Varen, daring to lift his gaze. "The Southern Pack refuses tribute again. They say they will not bow to a king who has forgotten the moon's mercy. Draven's fingers tightened around the armrest. Mercy. A sound escaped his throat, half laugh, half growl. I was born from the moon's mercy, he said, and I am what it became. The council went silent. Across the room, the Queen Mother exhaled softly through her nose, her gloved hands folded. You must remember appearances, my son. A king who rules by fear must never let them see it rule him. Draven's jaw flexed. Then perhaps they should stop testing it. A pulse of power rippled through the hall, snuffing half the torches. Blue fire guttered, shadows dancing like ghosts. Several courtiers fell to their knees. Majesty! Someone gasped, but the beast inside him was already awake. It clawed up from his ribs, a second heartbeat too strong for flesh. He could smell everything. Blood, fear, the faint scent of silver from his mother's bracelets. His vision blurred, edges rimmed with crimson. He gripped the throne until cracks spiderwebbed through the stone. Clear the court, the Queen Mother whispered sharply, but her voice sounded far away. Draven's pulse thundered. He tried to breathe, to swallow the growl rising from deep within. Not here. Not again. He stood, every movement trembling with restraint. The guards hesitated, uncertain whether to help or flee. Leave, he roared. The command crashed through the chamber like thunder. Doors slammed, footsteps scattered. When the echo faded, only he remained, with his mother watching from a distance, her face carved from marble. Draven pressed a hand to his chest. Beneath the skin, something vast and fiery coiled. He could almost see it. A wolf of flame caged inside him, snapping at the bars. He staggered down the steps of the dais. The air tasted of iron. His mother's voice trembled for the first time. Draven, you must rest. Let the healers. Healers? He gave a bitter laugh. They fear to touch me. The beast laughed too, a deep echo inside his skull. They should fear you. You are the moon's wrath. You were never meant to be gentle. He slammed his fist into a pillar. The marble exploded, shards skittering across the floor. The noise eased the pressure for a moment, but guilt followed close behind. Every time the beast took hold, something broke. Walls, soldiers, sometimes worse. He turned away from the wreckage, breath ragged. I need air, he muttered, pushing through the side door before anyone could stop him. The night beyond the palace was alive with frost. Snow fell in silver threads over the citadel, softening the edges of towers that reached for the moon. Draven walked alone through the courtyard garden, each step leaving a faint trail of heat on the stone. He had forgotten what warmth felt like without fire. At the center stood the moon fountain, its water eternally frozen, a relic from the first kings. He stared into its icy surface and saw not a monarch, but a monster, eyes glowing, veins lit faintly with inner light. How many years has it been since I touched another without burning them? He remembered a child once, his younger brother, dead now. A single embrace had scorched the boy's skin. The court had called it an accident. Draven had called it the beginning of exile. A breath of wind stirred the snow, carrying faint whispers from the forest beyond the walls. He closed his eyes and felt it. Something faint, like a heartbeat echoing miles away. A voice, fragile yet steady. If you still see me, let my life have meaning. He straightened sharply, scanning the horizon. No one stood there, only trees and moonlight. The beast growled low. A prayer? To whom? To the same goddess who cursed us, Draven whispered. But the sound lingered in his chest, oddly soothing. For a moment, the fire within him dimmed, as if that faraway plea had reached the part of him still human. He clenched his fists. Enough. He turned back toward the palace, unaware that beyond those woods, a wolfless girl was indeed walking closer. Snow fell thicker as midnight deepened. The citadel guards avoided looking up at the high balcony, for the king's shadow was there again, a black silhouette framed by falling ice. Draven Valeborn stood against the wind, his cloak whipping like wings. Below him, his kingdom glimmered in shades of silver and frost. Above him, the moon watched, cruel, eternal, silent. "Why do you still look at me?" he whispered to it. "You made me this." A flicker of orange pulsed beneath his skin, crawling up his throat like molten veins. He gritted his teeth and forced it back down. But the beast inside him laughed. It always laughed. "You cannot deny what you are, Draven. Fire pretending to be flesh, wrath pretending to be a man." He slammed his palms against the frozen railing. Frost melted instantly beneath his touch, sizzling into vapor. He hated the sound, like water hissing away from flame, like peace burning too fast to last. He hadn't always been this way. Once the Silver Dominion had celebrated his birth with 7 nights of light. The Moon Priestess herself had marked his forehead with silver ash, calling him the moon's chosen son. But at 14, the first flames had erupted from his hands. The palace chapel had burned. By dawn, half the priesthood lay in ashes. And from that day, he learned to speak softly and strike fast, before the fire struck him first. For years they called him Protector, then Destroyer, then Monster. And still, he wore the crown. Because who else could control what they feared? The next evening, the court gathered again, this time for a diplomatic feast. Draven's mother begged him to appear calm. "Drink nothing, speak little, smile enough to make them forget what you are." He obeyed. For a time. Until a southern envoy, bold with wine, raised his cup and laughed. "A king who hides his hands in gloves? Tell me, do they burn that easily?" The laughter that followed was thin and sharp. The beast inside Draven stirred, slow, deliberate, dangerous. He forced a smile. "Would you like to find out?" The man faltered, sensing the danger too late. Because when Draven's gloves came off, the torches flared brighter, as if recognizing their master. "Majesty," the Queen Mother whispered urgently, "please." But the room was already trembling. Every heartbeat pounded against his senses. Too loud, too close, too human. The fire within him roared awake, a storm that refused to be caged any longer. The envoy dropped his cup, wine spilling like blood across the marble. "Run!" someone gasped. Then the beast came through. Flames ripped through the air, wild and bright, licking the golden pillars. Nobles screamed, scrambling for the exits. Guards raised their shields only to watch them melt. Draven's eyes burned like twin suns, his veins glowing as molten fire crawled up his neck. He roared, not as a man, but as something ancient, something divine and forsaken. Windows shattered. The moonlight itself seemed to flinch. The Queen Mother, tears streaking her face, stood at the edge of the dais. "My son, you must fight it. You are still king." But he couldn't hear her. He was lost inside the fire, inside the voice that had haunted him since boyhood. "Burn it all, Draven. Let them remember what the moon gave them to fear." And so he did. The banners caught flame, the grand table splintered, the ceiling cracked, the beast that lived within the king claimed its due. And then, in the heart of that destruction, a whisper touched his mind. Soft, human, steady. "If you still see me, let my life have meaning." He froze. The voice wasn't from the court. It wasn't from the beast. It came from somewhere far, deep within the snowbound forest miles away. He blinked, and for the first time in years, the fire paused. His chest heaved. The air shimmered with heat, but it no longer burned. The beast recoiled as if struck. "Who dares speak over me?" it growled. But the voice came again, faint and fragile, like candlelight in darkness. "I'm not asking for power. I'm just asking to be seen." Something in those words broke him open. The fire dimmed, his vision cleared, and the rage fell silent. The court watched in astonishment as the flames around him withdrew into his skin. Draven fell to his knees, gasping. Steam rose from his shoulders. The Queen Mother ran to him, cradling his face with trembling hands. "Draven, and what happened?" He shook his head slowly. "Someone spoke to me." "Who?" He looked toward the window, to the dark stretch of forest beyond the frozen plains. "I don't know," he whispered, "but it wasn't the moon." That night, while healers and guards cleaned the wreckage, Draven walked alone again through the courtyard. The moon fountain shimmered faintly, though no wind stirred it. He knelt beside it and pressed his burning hand to the ice. For once it didn't melt. "Whoever you are," he murmured to the cold air, "you stop the fire." Far beyond the castle walls, a young woman stumbled through the same snowfall, barefoot, half-starved, her arms wrapped around herself. Ilara Wynn. Each step she took toward the Silver Dominion felt like walking through destiny's breath. She didn't know why she was drawn there, only that something inside whispered go. And though neither of them knew it yet, that night, the cursed king and the rejected Omega had just crossed into each other's fate. Snow crunched beneath her bare feet. The wind howled like wolves mourning something ancient. Ilara Wynn didn't know how long she had been walking, only that the forest seemed to whisper her name. She should have turned back. She should have stayed hidden in the hollow where she slept. But the prayer she whispered days ago still echoed in her chest. "If you still see me, let my life have meaning." And now, that same whisper guided her through the darkness. At dawn, the sky split open with thunder, though no clouds gathered. From far away over the frozen plains, the towering spires of the Silver Dominion pierced the heavens. Their tips glowed faintly gold, like torches calling her home. Ilara wrapped her thin shawl tighter. The cold bit her skin, but something deeper pulled her forward. Every breath she took carried warmth, though the air around her was made of frost. She didn't know it, but her prayer had reached the heart of the fire itself, a king cursed by wrath, now drawn by her echo. And in the throne hall of Silver Dominion, that king stood once more before his people. "Bring the prisoner," Draven commanded. The courtiers trembled. The marble floors gleamed from the repairs of the last disaster, the night he lost control. But even now the scent of ash still lingered, a ghost that refused to leave. Two guards dragged a man to his knees before the dais. Chains rattled against the floor. "He conspired to poison the royal fountain," said one of the generals. Draven's golden eyes flickered. "And why?" The prisoner spat. "Because the moon chose wrong. You are no king. You are a curse." The room froze. Draven descended the steps, slow and silent. With each stride, the torches dimmed, as if the fire within him was jealous of any other flame. "Do you know what I am, traitor?" His voice was low, steady, dangerous. "I know you're not fit to rule," the man snarled. "You burn everything you touch." Draven's jaw tightened. The air grew heavy, hot. The gold veins along his neck pulsed like embers. He raised his hand, and the fire came. The court screamed as flames burst from the king's palm, slamming into the marble floor and spreading like a living storm. Columns cracked, banners caught fire, and the prisoner was thrown backward, crying out. The Queen Mother shouted orders, guards scrambled, but no one could get near him. The beast had returned. Draven's roar shook the hall. It wasn't human. It was the cry of something ancient and tormented, something that had once been divine. His crown fell from his head, clattering against the stone. His cloak burned to cinders. The light in his eyes wasn't gold anymore. It was molten red. "Majesty," someone shouted. "Please, control it." But there was no Draven left, only fire. And in that storm of destruction, the great doors of the throne hall opened. Ilara staggered in, half-blind from snow and exhaustion. She didn't even know where she was, only that the world was burning before her eyes. Guards tried to push her back. "Get out, girl. It's death inside." But she saw him. Through the flames, Through the madness, she saw a man kneeling in pain, fire bursting from his skin like punishment, and something inside her whispered, "That's him, the one she'd felt, the one who heard her prayer." She didn't think. She just moved. Her feet carried her through the fire. The heat licked her skin, but it didn't burn. People gasped. Even the flames seemed confused, pausing as she passed. "Stop," a guard shouted. "You'll die." But she didn't. Every step she took made the hall quieter. Every heartbeat drew her closer to the raging king. Draven turned, his face twisted in agony. "Stay back," he roared. "I can't control it." "I know," she whispered. He blinked. Her voice. It was the same as the one that had stopped the fire before, and before reason could stop her, Ilara reached out and pressed her trembling hand against his chest. It was as if time itself stopped breathing. The flames froze mid-air, suspended like glass. The roaring heat melted into silence. And the beast, the monstrous power that had devoured kingdoms, bowed. Draven gasped. His heartbeat slowed. His vision blurred as the fire retreated into his veins, shrinking, surrendering. Her hand was so small, so human, and yet it commanded what no priest, no army, no god ever could. He looked down at her. "Who are you?" She swallowed hard. "No one," she whispered. "Just someone who still believes you're more than this." He stared at her, the girl with frost on her lashes, eyes bright with fear and courage. No wolf scent, no aura of power. Nothing. "Wolfless," someone whispered from the shadows. "She's wolfless." The court erupted in murmurs. A wolfless Omega had just stopped the beast. Draven's breath trembled. "You shouldn't be able to do that." "I shouldn't be alive either," she said softly. "But here I am." And then she collapsed. When Ilara opened her eyes again, she was in a vast chamber lined with silver drapes. A faint golden light glowed above her, not from torches but from the runes carved into the walls. She tried to sit up, but her body was weak. Every part of her ached, yet she was warm, wrapped in furs softer than anything she had ever touched. The door creaked open. Draven entered. No crown, no armor, just a man in silence. For a moment he said nothing. He just looked at her, as if memorizing proof that she was real. "You touched me," he said quietly. Ilara blinked. I didn't mean to." "You stopped it." His voice trembled slightly. No one had ever heard the Alpha King sound uncertain. She lowered her gaze. "I just wanted you to stop hurting." Draven's hands curled into fists. "You don't understand. The beast doesn't stop. It kills. It consumes. Yet when you touched me, it—" He broke off, shaking his head. "It obeyed." "Maybe it wasn't the beast that obeyed," she said gently. "Maybe it was you." He looked up sharply. "What are you?" Ilara met his gaze. "A girl who was never chosen by the moon. Maybe that's why the fire listened. Because I had nothing to lose." Draven stared at her for a long time, and in his silence something inside him shifted, something that felt dangerously close to hope. By nightfall, the story had spread through the kingdom. The wolfless girl who tamed the beast, the Alpha King who bowed before her touch. Some called it a miracle. Others called it blasphemy. The Queen Mother summoned her advisors. "That girl is not safe," she said coldly. "If the people believe she can control the king, they'll worship her, or worse, use her against him." "She saved his life," one general argued. "She threatened his crown," the queen replied, "and I will not watch my son's throne fall to a beggar girl." Meanwhile, in the upper tower, Draven stood by Ilara's bedside again, watching her sleep. For the first time in years, the fire inside him was silent. He reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "How can someone so small quiet what the gods themselves fail to tame?" he murmured, and though she didn't stir, her lips moved faintly, as if answering in her dreams. Because love is older than power. Draven froze. The words echoed like a prophecy. He turned away, his heart pounding. He didn't believe in fate, but tonight even he couldn't deny it. When morning came, Alara woke to sunlight and the scent of wild mint. Her wounds were gone. The warmth that surrounded her wasn't just from the furs. It pulsed through her skin, like fire without pain. Draven stood by the window, the silver light painting him in shades of sorrow. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly. "I didn't come for you," she replied. "I just followed the voice that told me to keep walking." He turned to her. "And what do you want now?" She hesitated. "To know why the moon brought me here. To know why you feel like the answer." Something in his chest tightened. "You have no idea what you've done," he whispered. "You've bound yourself to something dangerous." Alara rose slowly from the bed. "Then let the danger begin." Their eyes met, king and outcast, flame and frost. And in that moment, destiny smiled. Because every great story begins the same way, with two broken souls, standing too close to the edge of something neither can control. Morning in the Silver Dominion broke quietly. Too quietly. The kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, but warning. From the high tower, Alara stood by the frost-rimmed window, her eyes tracing the kingdom below. The palace gardens shimmered beneath the first light, but she could feel it, the weight of eyes she could not see. Every whisper beneath the stone halls carried her name now. The wolfless girl, the witch, the curse that calmed the beast. She turned away, her heart heavy. Back in her pack, silence had meant rejection. But here, silence meant danger. By mid-morning, the royal court convened inside the great hall. Banners of silver and black hung from towering arches, but the air was cold with judgment. Draven sat upon his throne, a heavy crown of iron resting against his dark hair. His gaze swept across the nobles, men and women who had once trembled before him, but now looked at him with quiet, uncertain fear. The Queen Mother stood at his right hand, regal and sharp-eyed. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. "My king," she began, "the court demands clarity." Draven's tone was calm. "On what matter?" "The girl," she said simply. "The one you've allowed into the upper tower. The one who dared to touch you in front of the entire court. And lived." A ripple of murmurs filled the hall. Draven leaned forward, his voice dropping. "What of her?" "She is a danger," the queen said, eyes narrowing. "A wolfless omega with no lineage, no power, and yet she silenced the beast. Tell me, my son, what manner of creature does that make her?" The counselor beside her added quickly, "Majesty, the people are uneasy. Some believe she bewitched you. Others think the moon sent her to test your strength." Draven's jaw tightened. "And what do you believe?" His mother's gaze softened, though only slightly. "I believe you are forgetting what you are. You are the moon's punishment, not its plaything. You cannot be seen kneeling before a beggar." Draven rose slowly from his throne, and the hall fell silent. Every movement he made carried the weight of power, but also restraint. "Do you remember the last time the beast broke free?" he asked. The Queen Mother hesitated. "The fire almost consumed us all," he continued, stepping closer. "But she stopped it. Not your priests, not your guards. Her. That does not make her safe," the Queen replied coldly. "It makes her dangerous." Draven's voice hardened. "Then so be it. I'll decide what danger I choose to keep." He turned, his cloak sweeping behind him as he strode out, leaving a trail of stunned silence. That night, the palace did not sleep. Every servant, guard, and court lady had something to say. They whispered in corridors, in candlelit corners, by frozen fountains. "She bewitched him," some said. "She's the reason he hasn't burned the kingdom again," others argued. No one dared speak loudly, but rumors have their own kind of wings. And in the servants' quarters, Ilara could feel them fluttering, brushing against her wherever she went. When she entered the gardens to fetch water, conversation stopped. When she passed the corridors, maids turned their backs and crossed themselves with moonlight gestures. She wasn't angry, just tired. Rejection was a language she already knew too well. But this time, it hurt differently, because she wasn't just hated. She was feared. Later that evening, Draven found her alone in the moon garden, the only place in the castle untouched by snow. Strange that his fire had never dared burn here. Ilara knelt beside the small pool at the center, her reflection rippling as she whispered a quiet prayer. He watched her for a while before speaking. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. "The court is already looking for reasons to turn against you." She didn't look up. "They already have." He took a slow breath. "I can silence them." "You could," she said softly. "But why should you?" His brows furrowed. "Because you don't deserve their hate." She finally turned to him, her eyes glimmering like dusk. "You can't silence hate, Draven. Not with fire. It just grows louder in the dark." He stepped closer. "Then let them hate me instead." The words hung between them, heavy, real. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk your crown for someone like me?" He hesitated, the mask of the king cracking just slightly. "Because when you touched me, the fire listened. And since that day, I haven't known silence like this in years." Her breath caught. The honesty in his voice was raw, almost painful. "It wasn't power that stopped it," she whispered. "It was mercy." Draven looked down at her, at the girl who had nothing, yet carried more strength than any noble in his court. "You speak of mercy," he said quietly, "but you don't know what this world does to those who show it." She rose to her feet, standing before him. "Then teach me, and maybe I'll teach you how to be more than a monster." For the first time, the great Alpha King smiled. Not fully, but enough. From a distant balcony, the Queen Mother watched them, her expression unreadable. Beside her stood Lord Varen, the council's most cunning noble. "She has his attention," the Queen said. Varen's thin lips curved. "Attention is one thing, affection is another. If we play this right, both will destroy him." The Queen's gaze hardened. "I won't let that girl undo what took generations to build." Varen bowed slightly. "Then let me arrange a test. If the girl truly holds power, she'll reveal herself. If not, the people will tear her apart before she even touches your son again." The Queen turned back to the courtyard, where Draven and Ilara still stood under the moonlight. Her voice was a whisper made of steel. "Do what you must." Later that night, Draven escorted Ilara through the West Wing, a part of the castle few ever saw. Ancient portraits lined the walls, their painted eyes following every step. "Who are they?" she asked quietly. "My ancestors," he said. "Kings who ruled with strength, not mercy." "And you?" He stopped walking. "I'm the one cursed to fix what they broke." They reached a small balcony overlooking the sleeping city. Frost glimmered on every rooftop. The air shimmered faintly, alive with hidden magic. Draven leaned on the railing, staring at the horizon. "The first time the beast appeared, I was 14. I burned my brother alive." Ilara froze, breath catching. He didn't look at her, just kept staring into the night. "They said it was an accident, but I remember the feeling. The fire wanted it. It wanted to see what it could destroy." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but kind. "And yet you've spent your whole life protecting others from that fire. Maybe that's how redemption begins." He finally turned, his eyes meeting hers, molten gold and fragile hope. "You shouldn't care for me," he said. "Maybe not," she whispered. but maybe that's why I do. The next morning, the city awoke to bells. Rumor had turned to frenzy. Word spread that the Witch Omega would be summoned before the High Temple for judgment, the Queen Mother's order, sealed with the royal crest. Draven's fury was instant. He stormed into the council chamber, slamming the letter onto the table. "Who gave this order?" The Queen Mother didn't flinch. "I did. The people demand proof she's not a danger. Let her stand before the moon flame. If she is pure, it will not burn her." Draven's voice rose, the torches flaring. "You would risk her life on superstition?" "She risked all of ours by existing," the Queen snapped. The hall shook as Draven's rage surged, but he held it, barely. His fire wanted release, but Alara's voice echoed in his mind. "Mercy doesn't burn, it heals." He turned away sharply. "If she burns, the kingdom falls with her." The council gasped. He looked back at his mother, his voice low and final. "Touch her, and I will burn the throne myself." Then he left the chamber, leaving behind the stunned silence of a court that realized the unthinkable. Their king would defy crown and blood for a wolfless girl. That evening, Alara waited once more in the moon garden. The air was thick with unease. She already knew. She had overheard the whispers. The queen wanted her gone. When Draven arrived, his expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something deeper than anger. "They want to test you," he said softly. "They think you bewitched me." Alara smiled faintly. "Maybe I did, but only with honesty." He almost laughed, but it came out as a sigh. "They'll never accept you," he said. "Then don't make them," she replied. "Just be the king who sees what others can't." He looked at her, truly looked at her, at the girl who had walked barefoot into fire and silenced his curse with nothing but compassion. "Why do you trust me?" he asked. "Because even monsters deserve mercy," she said. "And maybe I'm the only one foolish enough to give it." Something inside him broke then, not in pain, but in surrender. He took her hand, slowly, carefully. And for the first time, the Alpha King of the Silver Dominion didn't tremble at his own touch. Far above the castle, the moon glowed brighter, as if witnessing a forbidden truth unfold. Love in its purest form had just been born between curse and compassion. But in the shadows beyond the garden walls, the Queen Mother's spies were already watching. And by dawn, every corner of the Dominion would know. The Alpha King was no longer untouchable. He was in love. And love in the Silver Dominion was the most dangerous rebellion of all. The moon hung low that night, swollen in crimson, like a wound in the sky. All across the Silver Dominion, wolves howled in fear. The Old Ones said it was a warning, that when the blood moon rose, something forbidden would be born. And in the great palace of black marble, the prophecy came alive. Draven Valeborn stood at the balcony of his war hall, eyes glowing with the pale fire of his beast. His chest rose and fell with the rhythm of battle drums that only he could hear, the beating of his curse, the song of the thing that lived inside him. Below, the entire court gathered. The Queen Mother, veiled in silver. The Council of Elders, cloaked in judgment. The nobles and generals, all waiting, all whispering the same name like a curse. Alara Wynn. She stood in the center of the hall, barefoot, trembling, her simple white gown fluttering like fragile wings. Her golden-brown skin shimmered under the torchlight, her hair tangled from restless nights of whispers and tears. She looked like something that didn't belong in a king's court, yet no one could look away. The girl who calmed the storm. The Omega, who touched the beast. The curse the king refused to cast away. Draven descended from his throne, the sound of his boots echoing like thunder. Each step silenced the whispers. Each breath deepened the tension. When he reached her, his voice broke through the stillness, low, dark, and trembling with something dangerous. "Alara Wynn," he said. "Do you know what it means to stand before me on a blood moon?" She swallowed hard, eyes wide. I know the danger, my king. He tilted his head, studying her. And still you stay? I made a promise under this moon once, she whispered, that my life would have meaning. If this is it, then so be it. The court gasped, some in horror, others in pity. But Draven only stared, his heart caught between awe and fear. He turned his hand upward. The room trembled as the ancient sigils of the blood oath began to burn across his palm, a language older than kings, older than wolves. Then let meaning find you, he said softly. And before the court, before the goddess, he pressed his palm against her chest right above her heart. Light burst between them, crimson, blinding, eternal. The mark seared itself into her skin, the mark of the Alpha King, a forbidden bond, a tie between power and nothingness, royalty and rejection. The crowd erupted into chaos. She's bewitched him. This is madness. She's wolfless. It's abomination. The Queen Mother rose, her voice slicing through the uproar like a blade. Draven Valeborn, you disgrace your bloodline. The bond will ruin the throne and it will curse your heirs. But the king turned, his voice a roar that shook the pillars. Enough! Silence. He looked down at Alara, who still trembled beneath his hand. I would rather burn my throne, he said slowly, his voice cracking like firewood in flame, than lose you. Those words would be remembered for generations, the vow that broke kingdoms. He swept her into his arms and led her through the sea of stunned faces, the firelight painting them both in shades of rebellion and ruin. And that night, while the world whispered, Draven and Alara stood alone in the sanctum of the moon chamber, where the walls glowed with silver veins and the air pulsed with the hum of divine power. She sat on the edge of the sacred pool, the reflection of the blood moon rippling around her. Draven knelt before her, his fingers tracing the fresh mark over her heart. It shouldn't have been you, he said, voice heavy with sorrow. But it is, she breathed. And I don't regret it. He closed his eyes. You don't understand, Alara. The bond, it ties more than hearts. It binds fates. My curse, it could consume you. Then let it, she whispered, tears shining in her eyes. If I must burn, I will burn beside you. Something in him shattered. The beast inside stirred, not in rage, but in longing. The same beast that tore through battlefields now trembled before her touch. He kissed her then, slow, desperate, filled with the ache of 1,000 unsaid truths. And for a fleeting moment, the world held its breath. But deep in the recesses of his memory, something stirred. A flash of moonlight, a field painted red, a small child's scream, the scent of smoke and fur. He pulled back, gasping. Draven, she whispered, her voice small. He turned away, gripping the stone wall. His body shook, not from desire now, but guilt, the kind that eats the soul. Alara, he said hoarsely, do you remember the night your pack fell? Her brow furrowed. How could I forget? The moon turned red, just like tonight. They said it was the beast of Silver Dominion. He killed them all. Draven's heart pounded. The truth clawed at his throat. The beast she spoke of, the monster who slaughtered her family, was him. He could still see it. The night he ascended the throne, the chaos of his first transformation, the blind rage that consumed everything in its path. The Alpha King who couldn't control his curse, the fire, the blood, the screams, and among them, her, the little girl who survived. He had thought her dead, but fate had returned her, not as vengeance but as salvation. He turned slowly, his eyes shadowed with torment. Alara, he said quietly, if you knew that the beast who killed your pack stood before you now, would you still touch me? The words hung like poison in the air, but before she could answer, a horn blared from the courtyard. The council had gathered, and this time they came not to advise, but to dethrone. Draven looked toward the window, the crimson moon reflecting in his eyes. His destiny, his curse, his love, all bound by the same light. He turned to her one last time. "Whatever happens after tonight," he said, "remember, you are not my curse. You are my peace." And as the great doors burst open and the guards stormed in, Draven stood tall, a king in rebellion, a beast in love, a man caught between blood and mercy. The blood moon burned brighter, sealing their fate. And in that terrible, beautiful light, the legend of the forbidden bond was born. The moon was pale again, no longer crimson, no longer bleeding, just cold, empty. It hung above the silver dominion like an indifferent eye, watching as the kingdom that once worshipped its light now whispered in fear. Inside the palace, silence ruled. For days, the throne hall remained empty. The king no longer held counsel. The courtiers spoke in murmurs, their voices trailing behind locked doors like dying prayers. And in the highest tower of the citadel, Alara Wynn sat alone, staring into a bowl of still water. Her reflection stared back, the mark of the Alpha King glowing faintly at the base of her throat. The mark that had once made her feel chosen, now felt like a chain. Since the blood moon, Draven had changed. He barely spoke. He barely slept. When she reached for him in the dark, he turned away, as though her touch burned. The nights that once echoed with their whispered laughter now hummed with distance, a distance thick enough to choke her heart. The servants avoided her now. The nobles refused to bow. Even the guards, once loyal to the king's word, glanced at her with quiet hatred. The Queen Mother's poison had spread well, but none of that hurt as much as the look in Draven's eyes, that haunted, guilty sorrow, as if every time he saw her, he remembered a sin he could never confess. One morning, as the mist still clung to the palace walls, Alara went searching. She couldn't stay in silence any longer. She found him in the Moon Chapel, the ancient place where kings once prayed before battle. He stood at the altar, his cloak discarded, his hand pressed against the cold stone that bore the royal seal. The fire and the torches flickered weakly around him, unable to touch his shadow. "Draven," she said softly, stepping closer. He stiffened. "Alara." His voice sounded like gravel, rough, hollow. "You've been avoiding me," she whispered. "I've been protecting you." She frowned. "From what?" He turned, and for the first time in days, their eyes met. His gaze was wild, like a man trapped in his own mind. "From the truth," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "Then tell me." He shook his head. "You don't want to know." "I need to know." The silence between them stretched, long and painful. Then, before he could stop himself, he reached out, fingers brushing her cheek like a ghost. "Some truths destroy what they touch, Alara. And I can't bear to watch you break." Her voice trembled. "You think I'm that fragile?" "No," he said, his throat tightening. "I think you're the only thing holding me together." He turned away, before she could see the tears that glimmered at the corner of his eyes. That night, she dreamed again. The same dream that had plagued her since she was a child. Fire, wolves howling, a beast's red eyes gleaming in the dark. But this time the dream changed. This time when the beast looked at her, she saw his face. Draven's. She woke up screaming. The sound traveled through the corridors, startling even the guards. By dawn, the palace was buzzing. Servants whispering about the girl who dreamt of beasts, and among them was one who did not whisper. A man older than any servant had the right to be. His hair was white, his robes plain, but his eyes gleamed with the weight of history. He approached her chambers with a bowed head and trembling hands. "My lady," he said, his voice trembling. "Forgive my intrusion, but I knew your mother." Alara froze. Her mother, a ghost of memory, a name she barely remembered. "Who are you?" I was keeper of the royal archives before your pack fell, he said, lowering his gaze. And I have long kept a truth hidden for fear it would destroy the crown itself. Her heart pounded. What truth? He hesitated, then motioned for her to follow. They descended into the catacombs beneath the palace, a labyrinth of bones and forgotten records lit only by the faint blue glow of enchanted torches. The air was thick with dust and history. The walls whispered. Finally, they reached a sealed door, one carved with the royal crest and the image of a wolf impaled by a crown. The servant's voice broke. Behind this lies the record of the Crimson Massacre, the night your pack perished. Her breath hitched. Why is that record kept here? He looked at her with sorrow. Because it was not a war between packs, but a purge by the crown itself. Her hands shook as he pressed the seal, the old magic yielding to his touch. The door groaned open. Inside, scrolls and blood-stained banners lay untouched by time. And at the center, a painting, dark and haunting. It showed a monstrous wolf wreathed in flame, its eyes glowing gold, its claws dripping red. Below the image, carved into stone, was a single name, Draven Valeborn, the ascension of the Blood King. Ilara staggered back. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, this can't be. The servant bowed deeply, tears filling his eyes. He was young. The curse had only begun. The council urged him to unleash the beast to prove his dominance. He lost control that night. Your pack, your family, they were in the path of his rage. Ilara's knees buckled, her vision blurred, her heart, her soul, cracked in half. She could still hear her mother's scream, the smoke, the blood, the moon, red as sin, her mate, her king. The man she had loved with every piece of her broken self was the monster who had made her broken in the first place. Her hand went to her chest, to the mark that bound her to him. It burned, searing her flesh as if the goddess herself mocked her. She fell to the floor screaming, a sound so raw and pure that the very air trembled. The torches flickered. The stone shook. Above, in the throne room, Draven clutched his chest, the bond searing him from within. He could feel her agony through it, every tear, every scream. Ilara, he whispered, falling to his knees. He knew then. She had found out. He raced down through the corridors, the guards shouting after him. He didn't stop until he reached the catacombs, the scent of ash and memory heavy in the air. When he saw her, crumpled, shaking, surrounded by relics of the dead, he froze. Her eyes rose to meet his. No longer soft, no longer full of wonder, just hollow. You, she breathed. It was you. He said nothing. There were no words strong enough to hold that kind of guilt. She stood, her whole body trembling, and struck his chest with both fists. You killed them, she screamed. You killed my family. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. I did, he said quietly. And I have lived every day since in their shadow. Why didn't you tell me? She sobbed. Because I wanted you to love me before you learned to hate me. The confession fell between them like a blade. She stared at him, her lips trembling, the mark on her chest glowing brighter, reacting to her rage, to her pain. Love you? She whispered. You were the nightmare that destroyed my world. I was a monster, he said, tears glistening in his eyes. But you made me human again. Don't you dare, she hissed. Make me your redemption. He reached for her, but she recoiled, stumbling backward. I loved you, Draven. I gave everything. And you... Her voice broke. You were the reason I had nothing left to give. Then the bond snapped. A searing flash of light tore through the room, throwing them apart. The goddess herself seemed to cry out. The mark that had united their souls now burning into scarred ash. Draven gasped, clutching his chest as the pain ripped through him. Alara fell to her knees, the glow fading from her skin, replaced by cold emptiness. The connection between them, gone. What was once love had become a wound that would never heal. And as she looked at him one last time, her voice broke into a whisper that sounded like a curse. "You took everything from me once. You won't do it again." She turned and ran, vanishing into the shadows of the catacombs. Draven tried to follow, but his strength failed him. He collapsed beside the relics of his own sin, a king brought low by the truth of his crown. Above them, thunder rolled across the silver dominion. The moon wept, and somewhere in the dark, the goddess whispered to herself, amused by the tragedy she had woven. Even love cannot unwrite blood. The night she ran, the moon hid her face. No light touched the silver dominion. No stars dared to follow her path. Only the wind carried her name, Ilara. Ilara, like a ghostly song through the mountains. Her feet bled as she fled the castle grounds, the mark of the Alpha King still burning faintly across her chest, a cruel reminder of a love that had turned to ash. The forest swallowed her whole, dark, endless, alive with whispers of ancient spirits. She did not stop. Not when the cold tore at her skin, not when branches ripped her gown, not even when she heard the distant howls, the cries of the beast that hunted her. For somewhere behind her the king had lost his mind. Draven Valeborn stood at the gates of his shattered throne room, bare-chested, breath ragged. The scent of her absence filled his lungs like poison. Guards bowed from afar but dared not approach. The fire in his eyes no longer belonged to a man. It was the fire of something ancient, something broken. "She's gone," he whispered, his voice trembling. "She's gone. Because of me." His beast stirred within, the same creature that had slain armies, the same curse that had painted his past in blood. And when grief opened the door, the beast stepped through. With a roar that shook the pillars, Draven transformed. Bones snapped. Flesh tore. The Alpha King's crown fell to the floor, rolling into shadow. What rose in its place was not a ruler, but a storm given form. The beast leapt from the balcony into the night, its cry echoing through every valley of the realm. Villages lit torches in terror. Mothers hid their children. The moon's punishment had returned. By dawn, the palace was no longer his. The Queen Mother stood before the throne, draped in mourning black. Her face was carved with false sorrow, her voice smooth as silk. "My son has fallen to the curse," she declared to the council. "The blood moon has claimed his mind. For the safety of the realm, a new heir must rise." The nobles bowed, not out of loyalty, but out of fear. They had seen what happened when Draven's beast ruled unchecked. "Crown the next in line," she commanded, her voice ringing through the marble hall. "Prince Cale Valeborn will rule in his brother's stead." A young man, Draven's cousin, stepped forward. Ambitious, handsome, unscarred by guilt, and utterly loyal to her. Thus, while love burned in the wild, betrayal took the throne. In the forests beyond the Silver Dominion, Ilara stumbled through fog and thorn, her tears mingling with rain. The goddess was silent. The bond, though severed, still pulsed faintly within her chest, echoing like a dying heartbeat. Every step felt like walking away from herself. When the sky rumbled, she knew. He was near. Trees bent under invisible weight. Birds fled. And then she saw him, the monster that once had been her king. Massive, glowing eyes like molten gold. The beast that had destroyed her past, now tearing through the forest in search of her. "Draven," she whispered through trembling lips, even though she knew he could no longer understand words. The ground split as he landed before her, claws digging into the soil. The air shook with his growl, a sound filled not with hatred, but agony. He moved closer. She should have run. But love, even shattered, has strange courage. Slowly, she lifted her hand. "Please," she whispered. Don't do this to yourself. For a moment, just one, his golden eyes flickered. The beast trembled, then it turned away with a cry that shook the heavens and vanished into the wilds, leaving behind only torn earth and silence. Days bled into nights. Draven's madness spread across the realm like a plague. He burned the border camps that defied his rule. He tore through rebel packs and towns that once swore allegiance to his crown. The rivers ran red beneath the silver dominion. The people began to call him by an old name, the Red Wolf of the Moon. And as each fire rose, the Queen Mother's voice grew louder. See? The beast consumes all it loves. The goddess punishes sin. But in secret, she sent hunters, not to kill him, but to find Alara. Because even she knew, wherever the girl went, the king would follow. Far above the burning lands, the moon goddess watched from her silver throne of stars. Her voice was soft, echoing through fate itself. They blame me for cruelty, she said, but I only reveal the truth that lives within them. The stars trembled, like they feared her laughter. Let them burn, she whispered. Only through ruin do mortals learn the cost of their choices. When Alara reached the edge of the dominion, she found a village in ruin. Homes reduced to blackened stone, air thick with smoke.